Let's turn our attention back now to the fallout from that BAI ruling on how Sean Gallagher was treated during the frontline debate and subsequent stories to it. One name that was mentioned a lot around that time because she was one of the people who posed a question to Sean Gallagher on the night. Glenna Lynch is on the line on Newstalk. Glenna, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, how are you?
I'm very well, good to talk to you. Glenna, what was your experience? Because you definitely asked a question of Sean Gallagher on the night. Was it your question?
Oh, absolutely it was. And what struck me the most listening or reading the papers yesterday was that the experience described in the papers was so different to the one that I had had. And I assume I started out in the same way. I would have sat down the week before the show, just as Joe blogs, and sent an email to Pat Kenny, the sort of one that I'm sure most of you receive at some stage from somebody. I was, dear Pat, there are some serious questions that need to be raised. We're depending upon you to ask them on the night, maybe the last night where there's an opportunity. And I sent him maybe a 2-page email, and then I got an email back from a member of the frontline team saying, was there a specific question that I would like to ask, and could I give them a phone number? So I sent back the bones probably of the question that I asked on the night and my phone number, and they called me and said, well, would I like to ask my own question? So it went very much the way you might expect it to go, and I had no experience of ever having contacted either a radio or a television show or of speaking on air, so I would have been in a similar situation to the man who spoke in the papers yesterday. But certainly I would have had a couple of emails and maybe 3 or 4 phone conversations beforehand, but there was absolutely no sense of any type of editorial direction or a push to go one way or another or a suggestion. It just didn't happen. It wasn't my experience at all.
So you got no sense of an agenda on the night, that they were out to get Sean Gallagher, or that in some way that the debate was an attempt was being made to orchestrate the debate in any way?
I had no sense of that. I mean, certainly the night went a particular way, but I think that was the content of the debate. I think if we look back, there was probably questions, to all candidates and across the board, but I think the ones that, gained the most attention and had momentum because of their content, and I suppose because of Sean Gallagher's own reaction, actually fed that momentum, and the show moved that way. So it would be a very strange situation where you kind of, I don't know how a show would have ignored the sort of his initial responses and then just moved on to talk about, just to try and push other issues when seriously there was an interest, obviously. So I had no experience of a direction. Was there a flavour on the show on the night? There was, but I think that was just led by information and questions that needed to be answered and events, and also, the reaction of the candidates. So I really feel it's very unfair to say or to suggest, and it's actually quite sinister to suggest that there is, that something was contrived. And I suppose I believe in freedom of speech, and I certainly feel that I, as just a normal person out there, was able to put up my hand, send an email, really, to be honest with you, just expecting that Pat Kenny would ask some questions and then being invited to ask my own. And I really appreciate that opportunity, and I think it's something that we have to encourage. I mean, there's an awful lot of stuff going on out there at the moment.
There's no point in journalists asking the questions the whole time. The public has a right to ask them as well. When you said you got a flavour that was the way the show was going on that night, and we're all looking at this now with the benefit of hindsight, we're forgetting what it would have been like on that day, which was the day, I think it was the day before the moratorium would have kicked in. Do you think that was the national mood at the time, that questions were being put to Sean Gallagher that were difficult?
I think certainly, in the 2 weeks before, both the Independent and the Times and various other papers, there was constantly, questions being raised, and most of the articles had questions in them. And to be honest with you, that's where I, was educated about it or looked at it. And, even if you Googled sort of WikiLeaks at that, or not WikiLeaks, Wikipedia at that stage, there was a certain, if you looked at a CV or a period of 10, 20 years, there was quite a bit of information. And I think from the press coverage in the run up to it, you could see that he was being asked questions, but there was no answers forthcoming. So I suppose by the time...
Well, he would argue, to be fair, he would argue that he was answering them to a certain degree. Obviously, he wasn't answering them to the degree that you were happy with. But when you were there in the audience on that night, you got to ask your question as well, and everyone remembers that who watched the debate. But when the tweet was put to Sean Gallagher, what was the reaction like in the studio? And so I remember there was, later on when he mentioned brown envelopes, the audience reacted quite audibly. But what was it like when the tweet was put?
I suppose it was, I think his reaction to the initial Martin McGuinness intervention, and even when you were sitting there, there's only 10 or 15 feet away from everybody really, and his reaction to even my question later on, and to the tweet, there was a certain amount of anger. His body language he was quite angry. He was very angry from even the Martin McGuinness stage. There was a mood, I would even say there was a change in the audience, probably from people who had been relatively benign towards Sean Gallagher, or possibly even had been considering voting for him. But certainly it was like an unfolding, or I think his own reaction and his body language, his eyes, the way the anger that was there, it was palpable. And I think that people reacted to that on a very human level, and you could see it. And somehow there was almost, you could hear people thinking, well, is this presidential? No, it's not. So there was a discomfort at the way he handled things. And I know a lot of political commentators have described that discomfort as being because he wasn't sort of, well trained or well versed in these things, or he didn't have much experience. But it was much more of a human thing than that. There was actually a moment where you looked and you saw, and you saw the white of a man's eye or a woman's eye. And I suppose for all of us, in terms of trying to decide who we vote for, that's the kind of thing you react to.
And how did you feel when you found out that was an erroneous tweet, that it was wrong? I mean, I knew you took part in a programme the following day on RTE radio, and at that point it was still being disputed as to whether it was right or wrong. Now we know it was wrong.
A few days afterwards, there was really very little about the tweet. I don't even remember when I phoned in the next morning to the show. I was driving along and he started to suggest that I was some sort of plant, and I phoned the show and went on air. But I don't even remember being conscious of the tweet then as having been as momentous as it's being described now. And I read the BAI report on Friday, and I thought it was sort of very thorough. They addressed everything. And if anything in coverage since then, I think that, very little has been said about the fact that basically the BAI said, there was nothing really said that was completely wrong. It was just the delivery of a tweet without a verification meant that possibly he'd be unfairly treated. So
the tweet content was wrong, to be fair, and it was sent out. We don't know by whom, but it was sent out erroneously as under a Sinn Féin banner, which it wasn't.
Sure.
Can I just ask you, Glenna Lynch? Did you meet Pat McGurk, this gentleman who was in the Sunday Independent? I know the studio is a very small place. Did you get to meet anyone else or talk to them?
Arrived. No, I was sitting beside an older man, and I was trying to remember what his question was, and I can't for the life of me remember it, but it wasn't to Sean Gallagher, it was to someone else. And I don't remember, I sort of recognised his face. I thought when someone played it back on television in the last few days, but no, I didn't. There was a huge number of people at the debate, and you just are brought in and seated, sort of maybe 10 minutes before, and there was quite a buzz and atmosphere and the thing, but really people weren't speaking to one another very much. There wasn't much of an exchange at all. So you
didn't get the impression of anyone else that people were being prepped or people were being primed to do anything in particular?
Absolutely not. No, I truly didn't. I mean, no. And I thought, certainly I think the man I was sitting beside had been to Frontline before possibly, and he was very comfortable in himself, whatever his question was. And, I don't, at that point you're actually concentrating quite hard to remember what it is that you want to say, because I put a lot of thought into the question, my own question, because I felt I wanted to try and, if I didn't get a chance to respond, or if Sean Gallagher didn't really answer me, just swatted me off, which is what I probably thought would have happened, well then I wanted to have said as much as I could. So, I was trying very hard to deliver the question I wanted, and the question that I asked on the night was probably much longer than the question. I think I probably threw a few extra words into it, and I filled it out a little bit myself, but mainly to try and have as much up front as possible, because I thought the thing would just move on and I wouldn't even get to respond. But no, I can say categorically there was no sense of...
If that was your experience then, and RTE did nothing wrong, and this is all being debated in the media now and in public about the integrity of the organisation, the integrity of news and current affairs, do you think that RTE as a public body, therefore, if it has nothing to hide, should hold some kind of public inquiry, some kind of public forum like that Oireachtas committee, just to clear its name and to say, look, we didn't do anything wrong on the night, apart from the tweet. We know the tweet was wrong, but we weren't priming anybody or prepping anybody.
Well, I absolutely believe that they would have nothing to hide. Insofar as I am aware, obviously this gentleman's experience seems to be different to mine, but my understanding and my experience was very different. And I honestly don't believe that they have anything to hide. I would question whether at this stage, with all that's going on in this country, we should be having any more inquiries. I mean, inquiries in Ireland typically have taken longer than they ought to, and of course more than they should, of every variety. I would have thought that you've got to respect the findings of the BAI, and that is the method under which we we look at
a line was being drawn under that effectively last week, but then the article of Mr McGurk yesterday seems to have changed that, and that's where it's kind of put it back on RTE. Look, and a Oireachtas committee isn't going to cost us a fortune if they go in there and are asked a few questions by TDs.
I suppose Mr McGurk, I suppose, would probably need to say a little bit more at this stage, or, to somebody to try and, establish to what extent his feelings are. I mean, the difficulty about print media is that sometimes, things are stated and they're true, but they're factored in a certain way. So I think probably, and I'm sure personally he would like to say more. So I mean, I think he should be given an opportunity to say as much as he possibly can on the subject. But and it probably just needs a little bit closer looking, or if there are many other people. But my gut feeling is that there aren't other people who would have a similar story to tell. There's just something not quite right.
Well, Glenna, it's good to hear your take of events as well. Have you been contacted by RTE or anyone related to this debate since? Did you contribute to the BAI report, or did they get on to you to find out the truth?
I wondered at the time, because I remember reading a press report afterwards that Sean Gallagher was going to make this complaint, and there was a sort of a muddiness around him complaining about the entire content of the programme. And I remember saying to my husband, I wonder, will I get a phone call? But no, I didn't. I mean, I have been, I contributed myself to a frontline programme recently, but it was completely nothing to do with that. It was to do with just small businesses and the economy and things like that, so it was nothing like that. But no, I haven't. I've been contacted today by people in the media, but not anybody from RTE.